finished up a meeting with the governor and some of the commissioners, and I'm really encouraged by the fact that, as you saw, targets from the House came out on Saturday. And again, it's important to remember that those are targets. Those are not an exact. The work will continue. One of the most encouraging things that I have I'm seeing over time is the governor is calling us together. As you've heard from me specifically, wanting to make sure that that happens, that we can start the conversations. Our chairs are all doing the work that is needed right now within the committee structure, now that they have the targets, and that work is continuing on this week. There might be a couple of extra hearings for some bills that'll go on through next week, and then as we come back from break, that's when the work will take place. I don't have specifics to share with you at this point other than what you've seen coming out of the House and then as you've seen from both the governor and the Senate too. But this is a good start of the process. A very unique time. This is the first time in a number of years that we have that impending deficit, as we've talked about, and that can't be ignored. And we recognize that, and so the numbers, and I've got Chair Torkelson here with me too, along with Leader Johnson, but as we are looking at that deficit going forward, that has to be top of mind, that we're doing the right thing. Increasing revenue, increasing taxes on Minnesotans, given what we have all seen on the increases and the spending of the surplus over the last 2 years as a non-starter, we recognize that, but these are talks going forward that are going very, very well. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Senator Johnson.
Thank you. Well, Speaker Demuth, I didn't want to spill the beans, but I'll give you all the secrets that happened in there. No, it was very high level. It started to talk about the targets, going through the different areas that we're going to have to get through before we get to a deal here in the end. We've got a month and a half left before the end of session, but very optimistic that we can get finished on time, given that we're already starting to go through the different jurisdictional areas and try to figure out where we can come together on that. So it's encouraging to be with the leaders and the governor in there as well, and hopefully these meetings continue and we make some substantive progress as we continue through this process. Sure, I don't think it's any secret. You saw our higher ed chairs in there, and so we just started going through the programs and some of the issues that will be within that. So it was just a good high-level discussion that we had. No agreements, no real discussion, just a matter of getting through what's going on in that budget.
And Speaker, we talked about bringing kind of a bigger group. Should we read more into that it wasn't just for leaders, but that...
It was the leaders, and then again we heard from higher ed, and I think that's an important piece as we're looking at different challenges within the budget, hearing from the commissioners and the specifics to make sure that we're all under the same understanding as we make those decisions. So nothing to read into negative. I'm again very encouraged by the fact that the four leaders along with the governor and then as needed other topics are being brought into the conversation. That's a really good place for us to be in. I still believe that we can get this work done on time by May 19th. I'm very hopeful, and there's nothing to lean into the fact that that could be challenged at this point.
Talk a little bit about how you're working through being so far apart on some things. So for the House budget, education hormones are actually running for the READ Act this biennium, nothing over base details. The governor has cuts to education that were heard today. The Senate has, I think, like $600 million or something in the tails. So when it seems like you guys are all over the map of like priorities, how are you guys zeroing in on the differences?
I think it's important to recognize, again, these are targets, and the work and the committees are going on both in the House and in the Senate. I can turn it over to Chair Torkelson as he and Co-Chair Stevenson worked together on these targets and really came up with what was needed for the House. That work will continue. You're going to see differences, and we recognize that, but this is part of the budgeting process that happens every year. Very unique, though, under the tie situation in the House, so that good work is already going forward. Chair Torkelson, is there anything you'd like to add to?
Well, specifically to the education situation, we really don't understand what the Senate is up to in that, in what we call the tails. So we're waiting for more information. I think we all support education, and we will figure out a way to get this thing working. I would just add that I tell my colleagues every day that we're making history. This is the first time we've had co-chairs of Ways and Means coming to an agreement on budget targets and getting it done on time. I'm very proud of my co-chair, Zach Stevenson. We met constantly for about 12 days to get here. Hopefully we've set a great example for our chairs in the House that they can now negotiate a deal between them to reach their budget targets in a way that they can support in a bipartisan fashion. It's a new experiment for Minnesota, and so far so good.
So unless something's changed since when we've been talking, I think President Trump's tariffs are still expected to take effect. So now the rest of the reciprocal tariffs. Are you supportive of those? Are you concerned about the economic impact of those? Can both of you address?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the start of that. I think it's important to recognize we have work that we have to do here in the state of Minnesota, which is what is known at this point of where we're at. That is our primary focus on getting that work done on time. Of course, we will keep an eye on what is happening at the federal level, and as that does possibly have an impact later on, again, our work can be done on time. If we would need to come back for a special session later to make any adjustments, we are open to that. But at this point, we've got to get the Minnesota work done first with that in mind, but not over trying to guess on something that we don't have details on at this point.
How's your daughter?
Who asked that? I have good news, yes. I have a new grandbaby. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Everyone is healthy and good, so thank you for asking. The reality of where we are in the state budget with the spending of an $18 billion surplus and the raising of taxes and fees of $10 billion on all Minnesotans, we can't do anything but look at ways to right-size government. That is what is needed in the state of Minnesota. We've added excess spending. We've added a large number of FTEs, over 6,000 over the last 2 years, and we have to right-size government in this point. So I am encouraged in the direction and the conversations that are taking place.
If I could add to that too as well, and we keep hearing about cuts, but I think what we're really looking at is prioritizing the money that we're going to be spending. The state's going to spend somewhere around $66 billion, so we are going to be spending money, but where we want to be spending that money is a big key to this session. And so that's what we're focused on. What are going to be the priorities? What are we going to focus those dollars on? And that's really what these discussions are all about today. So it's not about cutting, but it's about where we're investing.
Mr. Leader, can you talk about federal cuts and how you feel like the state legislature can and should handle that?
We can talk about the federal cuts, but right now that's just a distraction of the work that we have to do. So we've got issues that we can deal with right here in the state of Minnesota. As the speaker said, once we get going down the road, if there's a change going forward with federal dollars, maybe we'll have to come back and address those issues later on this year. But right now we're going to focus what's going on that we can control.
And layoffs already happening. Do you have any reaction to that at the state level?
I'm not privy to all the information on what's going on there, so no comment on that.
I have a question for Chair Torkelson. So your numbers show that if without the discretionary inflation adjustments, the House is actually only cutting for 26, 27, and 36, 15 billion. Can you talk about the way you decided to present your cuts and that they might actually be the lowest amount of cuts?
Well, we could spend a long time talking about inflation and how it interacts with the state budget. It's complex because we have built inflation into many budget areas. Education and HHS, for instance, are automatically getting inflation increases. So it gets a little complex. I like to look at the top line numbers. If we compare this budget to what was spent in the previous biennium, we've made a major cut. And a lot of that was one-time spending, but it's also some program reduction. And we believe we're in a good spot. We believe we've got a balanced proposal. It's a compromise. It would be different if Republicans were writing their own budget or if Democrats were writing their own budget, but we've accomplished this without tax increases proposed in what we've presented. So I think we've done some good work. Not everyone's going to be happy on either side of the equation, right? And that indicates to me that we've reached a good spot. When everybody's a little bit unhappy, that's where we need to be. What's that? No shenanigans so far. My eyes were wide open looking for that. And I will also say I have not had to charge up my chainsaw. So things are good. It's good.
On the
think conversations and bills are being heard and looked at, and really don't have a position on that at all. Really, it's great to hear that he's meeting with them, but I more like the fact that the governor has been calling state workers back June 1st. I think that was an excellent move on his part. Thank you.
Pictures of our puppy that I'm happy to show you. Our puppy named Winnie.
You got a new puppy?
We have a puppy that's 10 months old.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. I'll show you later.
What kind of puppy?
Sure. Thank you, Dana Ferguson and everybody. We have just left a very crowded table with, credit to the highwomen. There are a number of people now engaged in this issue of the work to balance the budget together. I am really proud of the Senate DFLers that we've put together targets that balance out into the tails. So for all 4 years, we do it responsibly and we do it clearly. We're lined up with the governor on that. He agrees. It is important not just to balance for 2, but for 4 years. He cuts the structural deficit in half. We're close. We've got a little room there between us. But in this budget, our aim, right, is to balance like we did the last time in 2023, to do it responsibly like we did in 2023, to do the very best work we can for the people of Minnesota, understanding that there's all sorts of uncertainty that we are starting to see here, including fresh layoffs at the Department of Health, proposed layoffs or a temporary layoff up on the Iron Range for Menorca, one of the Iron Range taconite plants. So we are paying attention to balancing this budget, but my colleagues and I are also with an eye on the future, thinking about the ways in which a slowed economy or deep cuts coming from the federal government are going to be a part of our work, I expect, this summer and fall.
Are you concerned about the economic impact of the tariffs that may take effect today, and that may make the situation even more complicated?
I think that the uncertainty and the chaos, in some cases corruption, that we're seeing at the federal government are absolutely having an impact on consumer confidence, on the ways in which people are engaging with their own savings, with their retirements, and certainly with this day-to-day economy. So yeah, we're concerned about not just the tariffs, but the erratic nature of the tariffs. We're concerned about the cuts we already know about, the layoffs we already know about, both at the state and the federal level, and we are paying attention to the ways in which we can, within our ability, which is limited, within our ability, look out for the people who may be losing their jobs right now, or maybe losing precious other services that they count on.
How's the power sharing going in there? Because you've got the same situation, but the house is all new. How do you see that?
You know, it's important, I think, that we come in a room together, sit at a table together, even though it's crowded, and focus on what we need to accomplish for the people of Minnesota. I, on purpose, have invited Leader Johnson to join us. I think that is just a way for us to keep our communication open. We have been having a really good start to this session, and frankly, I think we are going to need each other as we work with Tied House and all of the perhaps lack of clarity that comes from a Tied House at times. So I'm counting on Leader Johnson to work with me at times, I think, to communicate with the Speaker of the House, Leader Demuth, so we can bring as much good information to the table and get this job done for the people.
Are you answering or tempering down any expectations from maybe some members who want to bring forward new spending items and maybe some scholarships for police officers' children, for example, that has bipartisan support in both chambers? How are you kind of managing, the economic reality with some of those asks, which I know are still out there?
So I think our caucus has a pretty good grounding now on what our expectations are for this session and what our obligation is to the people of Minnesota. We all come to every session with ideas, good ideas, that we believe will improve the lives of people, and some of those are going to have to wait. As I say, you can't always choose the moment that you're in the chair, and we're in these chairs right now at a time when there's economic uncertainty. Our values are the same, so we have to weather the uncertainty, do the best job we can for the people of Minnesota, hold on to the things that we think are important, and continue to persist in pursuing the ideas that may be not ready for prime time now, but will be in the future.
What's your response to school districts, some of whom are saying they're facing big budget holes or fiscal cliffs of their own? They want either more money, which isn't really on the table beyond the projected inflationary increase, or some of the mandates rolled back.
So I have been talking with school districts, with local units of government, counties and cities, townships. I think we have to recognize that we are similarly situated in facing uncertainty, and none of us are probably in a position to bail one another out. But if we are working closely together and we understand the priorities that each face and need, we're more likely to accomplish what we need to in this budget.
Do you think Governor Walz made the right decision in calling state workers back to the office?
That is a conversation for those workers with Governor Walz. I do understand the hardship that that proposes for people who have to find childcare, et cetera, but it is a subject that they need to hash out together.
Can you talk about the results of the Wisconsin Supreme Court election?
I have a cousin named Joellen Pauls, and she is a newly retired special education teacher in Columbus, Wisconsin, where I am from, and she's never been involved in politics before, but she has been door knocking, hosting, launching, very engaged in this race as a result of what happened in the 2024 election, and she was so filled with hope last night because of that victory. I am really, really happy to know that the voters in Wisconsin chose principle over the influence of Elon Musk's money, which I found incredibly disgusting, honestly, what he was doing. He gave the cheesehead a bad name, and I am really, really grateful that the voters in Wisconsin chose principle over that. Thank you. I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. Just finished another of the meetings, a broader meeting with Senate and House leadership bipartisanly, but the leads, the chairs and some of the staff. And I think the progress made, we have a chart of side-by-sides comparing apples to apples to apples, the proposals that are being made from the budget that I've had out, now a House budget and a Senate budget. And we've got a little bit of work to do on that, and we want to get an agreement where that is a public document to say, look, we all agree about inflation, we all agree on where these numbers are at, and we can start working from there. That's a really positive sign, a lot of good work being done, and this is easier said than done because of inflation, discretionary inflation, some of the programs that have inflation built in, to get everybody on the same sheet of music. And so I'm really encouraged by the work that was done there. And then we had a deeper dive by higher education leadership and Chairman Olson, or excuse me, Commissioner Olson from the Office of Higher Education, to do a deep dive and explain the funding around the state grant program and how closely it's tied, and those grant awards are tied to Pell Grants and student need at each of the universities. And so that's to help, because this year we have both a good and a bad problem. A good problem is that we have an enrollment increase in higher education, the 5th highest of any state in the country, but we're also seeing Pell Grants and FAFSA issues that are making the calculations a little difficult and the awards a little more nebulous in terms of what they're going to get. So that was good. I think we left on that in a good space. That Pell Grant, or excuse me, the state grant program, really important program, bipartisan support, public and private institutions, and that some changes that we had proposed to leave it less risky, that it's so dependent on the cuts that we're seeing from the federal government, and try and shore that up a little bit. But good progress. First week of April, I would say this bodes pretty well for us, that we're starting to come to consensus around the numbers, that what needs to be done. And all the budgets show cuts and responsible spending. I think it'll be dependent on how easily we can get to some agreements. With that, I'd be glad to answer a few questions.
Governor, how much are the federal cuts coming up behind closed doors? Is it affecting every single area?
Yeah, they're not really coming up in this meeting. Look, I understand that's kind of a sore subject, but I think you're seeing it play out in real time. And in the near future here, where I'm pressing my team, we're going to have a dashboard up that starts to show, almost like COVID, where you can track, you, especially in the press, can track of where those cuts are, where we anticipate them coming from, because they're happening so fast and without any lead into it. I'm telling my teams, if you've got a federal grant or federal program, to assume it's going to be cut, and start planning different scenarios accordingly. Because what happened with the Department of Health is that came out, and 170 people the next day are basically gone, and really important novel coronavirus and infectious disease tracking have been gutted. And that happened. It's going to happen in some of the employment space we have. I anticipate it's going to start to happen very soon in the education space. And what we're going to need, we as a state and we as the administration, we're going to need a dashboard that shows that, so when those cuts come, what's going to happen. But they're not really coming up in here yet. It had to be talked about today because of the relationship between when a Pell Grant goes down, a state grant goes up. We had to talk about it that way because that's what's impacting some of those numbers.
Governor, can you address the job cuts at the Department of Health because of federal cuts?
Yeah, that was it. That was the programs that were tied to infectious disease. They came during COVID. These were grants that were going to extend out until, I believe, July of 26, most of them. And we got no notice on it other than the day of. They made the announcement, I believe, on the 24th, and on the 25th, our people were gone. And those were mostly in the areas of infectious disease monitoring, some of the lab work. We also saw those cuts into Title X, which is reproductive health and things like mammogram screenings. And one of the areas I'm deeply concerned with is we're seeing the cuts also impacting some of our student chemical dependency work that we've been doing. For the first time, we're actually seeing some significant reductions in usage and overdose death. And right at the same time, we're going to see some significant cuts that basically those programs will be eliminated because they're not funded statewide. We use them in addition to the state programs.
As a quick follow-up, today is Rare Disease Advocacy Day here at the Capitol as well. They're concerned about federal cuts for research into that area. do they still have full state support for whatever you can do for the rare disease kind of?
Yeah, and the folks that were here too, I named today the month on limb loss and limb differences today. It's a group that I started working with called Wiggle Your Toes, that they got funding for research at the VA system, and we have a law that went into effect January 1st of this year that has insurance companies need to pay for orthotics or prosthetics for people, and that's not just so they can get around it, so if you need that orthotic to go skiing or whatever, they can get that. Those are things that a small number of people, but it really impacts them heavily. I think that's the thing I'm deeply concerned about, because most of those programs are almost all dependent on federal aid.
Governor, can you talk about your education budget? The House is making no cuts in their plan. Schools have testified that some of the cuts could be devastating when they're already facing shortfalls. Can you just talk about your rationale for where you're making the cuts and answering those concerns about this is a bad time for cuts to education?
Yeah, we're slowing the growth. When I would say so again, that both at the federal level and the state level, we're fine in the short run. And I'm making the case that the drivers in this are basically inflationary costs and more people entering the system around two areas: disability waivers and special education. And what we're talking about is making responsible slowing of growth, not cutting the programs. We're just not doing 13% increases, we're doing a 2% increase. And I think around education, I'm trying to guard those programs that really matter to me, because I think, again, I would make this case, I don't think the worst things the administration is going to do have been done yet. Those are still coming, and I would make the case that we see it across all agencies, and the reasons that everybody's asking to put some in is because the savings to make sure the budget is stabilized are coming out of those areas. But look, I've spent my entire life in education. I've advocated my entire career around it. I'm not going to do things that take it away from the services that we need to provide. But I think realistically we have to understand we're not in a position with these cost drivers to be able to increase the spending that's being asked for. We need to slow it.
Governor, why do you say worse? Because you got Mayor Carter.
Yeah, do I think this administration? Yes, they are detaining people who are here legally and shipping them to El Salvadorian prisons. They are cutting randomly from infectious disease and programs that prevent student addiction. I think they're just getting warmed up, and I could fully expect that as they continue to flaunt the rule of law, that there will be cuts in areas that we are required to provide those services with, that I think it's not going to be long, and we'll find them here in Minnesota. People are going to die because of these cuts that they made in. Our tax dollars that we sent to them, appropriated by the U.S. Congress through the Constitution, are being illegally cut by this administration. So I think people are lulled into a sense of, this is as bad as it's going to get. I'm an optimistic person, but I'm not naive. The worst is yet to come, in my opinion.
Two questions about your meeting with Mayor Carter.
Yeah.
One, is there a state role to play in this situation with Allianz Tower downtown, emptying out, Skyway closing?
Yeah.
Seems like public health or economic issue there. And then two, can the state afford to help the city with this?
Well, I think that's what we're going to find out. I make, whether it is St. Paul or whether it's Piers or whether it's Good Thunder, the state has a role in all of our communities, whether it's helping with infrastructure and things. And as far as St. Paul goes, I do think there's a role because the St. Paul hosts the state capitol. I also think that we can make an impact on it. I'm going to see what the proposals are. Now look, I have made no bones about it. I think there's a state role in some of these things, whether it is a infrastructure project like a water treatment plant or a stadium like US Bank Stadium. And I think the mayor's going to make the case of what the state can do. I don't know in this place where we're at. They may be talking infrastructure bonds and bonding, and that's an appropriate thing for a mayor to do. So.
And what about the tower? Are you concerned about the Allianz Bank Tower downtown?
Well, we're going to hear what they have to say, and I think that issue, this whole idea of commercial real estate space, the whole idea of office space or whatever, is a much bigger issue. I want to hear where the mayor's at on it.
Any response about the Wisconsin Supreme Court?
Yeah, I do have thoughts about the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, and I have it not on a partisan basis. I'm not going to try and pretend like I didn't care for that reason. But I would rather not be in a partisan position on a court race. And what was being attempted by Elon Musk in Wisconsin was an affront to democracy. It was a gross distortion of what we believe. And I don't think there's a clearer case of somebody just simply trying to buy a court for their own small ends. I find it ironic that Tesla's in a court case that has fairly significant in Wisconsin, that it might be to his best advantage. The best advantage to get rid of our weather forecasters. He says he wants to do it, or get rid of NASA, so he wants to do it. This guy is a menace. He is an unelected billionaire, and to have him put himself out there, he said that race will determine the direction of the country and how popular President Trump is, and it would determine the direction of Western civilization. If that's true, I'm glad to say that the oligarchs lost, democracy won, and we're in better space than we were yesterday. So I have pretty strong feelings about that, and I'm really proud of Wisconsin for getting out and voting. So, all right, folks, thank you. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Dave.